Vanari are the primary military organization of the Lumineth Realm-Lords, acting as their standing armies and form the radiant core of the host. They are charged with defending the nations of the Lumineth from threats from inside and beyond Hayesh. They are organized into phalanxes made of Vanari Element infantry who form shining companies whose dazzling brilliance makes them harder to target. Each Vanari army consists of smaller battalions formed accordingly to the Decree Tyronic, the principles of efficiency and warlike optimization. They often have the same number of Aurelin Wardens and Aurelin Sentinels. Enemies that attack in large numbers are stormed by Dawn Riders to balance the numbers before the enemy reaches the Vanari battle line. Aurelin means luminous host and has its origins in magic, as with so much of Lumineth society. Each weapon is enchanted, its tip made of sun metal that has basked in the light of Hayesh for centuries at a time. When the Aurelin Wardens call out the correct magical phrase, bolstering their power with aether quartz to ensure its focus, these tips of the spears glow white hot. They can melt through a thick breastplate as a heated ore would push through a plate of wax. The spear blocks of the Lumineth have learnt to time this ability absolutely perfect. When the enemy is but at a breath from their blades, their spear tip glows bright, and those who think their armour will turn aside or break the polearms realise with heart-wrenching jolt that they may have made a fatal mistake. The Vanari can use their aether quartz reserve kept in the form of a jewel on the helm, decorated weaponry or enhanced armour they burn with the energy of tiny suns, which is channeled through the staves and shafts of their weapons and reflected by their robes and armour to make the Lumineth appear as if they are bright and angelic figures. Many primitive enemies prefer to flee than face them, and the forces of darkness recoil at the burning touch of the Hayeshian energy. Marksmen that peer through the telescope or scrying lens at the bright Lumineth formations are blinded, and those who strike at find their vision blurring and their blades turned aside. So let's talk about the basics of a Vanari army. So what are we exactly? So to start off with, we're obviously Lumineth Realm-Lords. So we're going to get all the things that make Lumineth Realm-Lords awesome. We're going to get access to the Shining Company rules that all our Vanari units are going to have. That's what we're going to get for being Vanari. And on top of that, we're going to have the Aether Quartz reserves as well, which is a cool little ability that allows us to do a whole bunch of different things using this other resource that we get with Lumineth Realm-Lords. What's cool about the Vanari army, though, is it is an extremely good mixed force army. So you're going to have access to good shooting, good defensive units, good offensive units, cavalry, and even longer range artillery pieces now as well, and characters on top of that. The one thing I will say about Vanari predominantly, though, is that you're going to need to probably bring in some scenario, which is the wizard hero aspect of the Lumineth Realm-Lords. And normally Scenari and Vanari work very closely together. But just by themselves, not including the Scenari Mage cast, you've got plenty of magic in this army, as all Vanari units are all wizards. They've all got access to the spell called Power of Hayesh, which allows you to turn their mortal wound hitting weapons from 6s to do mortal wounds to 5s to do mortal wounds. And you've got access to cast this on every unit every turn. There's no rule of 1 applied to that particular spell. On top of that, all your Vanari units do get to choose additional spells as well, so this means you've got a ton of options to play around with, and there's just loads of different things. So, with that in mind, let's get looking at how exactly do we get started building up a Vanari heavy Lumineth Realm-Lords force. And so let's look, I guess, at where to start this force of Vanari. To start with, I think there's one character better than any other to start a force of Vanari with, and that is the Vanari Lord Regent. This is a brand new model coming out with the second wave of Lumineth Realm-Lords releases, and he's a pretty cool character. He's got 6 wounds, he's got a 3-up save, 14-inch move, which means he's pretty fast and he'll be keeping up with those Dawn Riders you potentially can have. But also, he's got some really cool rules, none better though than his spell. I think this is where it really comes into making this army be able to do a lot more things, in that he's got the greater power of Hayesh, where he can pick up to D3 friendly Lumineth units around him to cast the Sun Metal empowering spell on. It's effectively the same spell as the rest of the Vanari units have, but it's cast on the 7 instead of the 5. However, it picks D3, so this can enable you to hopefully maybe get a 1 or 2 units that are not having to cast Power of Hayesh on themselves, which means they've got access to cast other spells to pull off nicer combos. On top of that, he's got the Purest Aether Quartz, where you subtract 1 to hit rolls from attacks that target him, and you add 1 to casting roll when he attempts to cast a greater power of Hayesh. If this model is part of a Lumineth Realm-Lords army and uses the last Aether Quartz reserve, this ability cannot be used by the model for the rest of the game. So he's effectively got like some pure Aether Quartz on him. It's giving him +1 to cast that particular spell, so I mean he's going to be casting on a 6. If you've got other things in there to give him buffs, it'll get even easier. But the big thing here is that he's subtracting 1 to hit roll, so he's effectively got Shining Company on him, despite not actually being a Shining Company model. Also, you can think, in addition to this, he's going to have Lookout Sir, because he is a character that's not a monster, so this means he's going to be potentially -2 if he's sticking around near your friendly units. He does have a Sun Metal weapon when he does on his Regent sword, so that's 5 attacks, 2s, 3s, Ren 1, damage 1. It's not that bad. I mean, he's probably going to take out most other heroes of similar stature to him. And so he's just a 1 cast and 1 unbind hero, but he's pretty decent, I think, and for me, he's a great start to a Vanari army. I mean, he is the purpose-made hero for them. You do have an alternate build in the kit as well, which can build a particular named character, which, if you're playing Umetrica, is probably the better way to go. You can do that within there, but for me, I think the base one is probably the better option to start with. Now onto the units I suggest buying. Now, I would suggest to start with 2 boxes of the Wardens, the pikemen that come with Vanari. The reason I suggest this is because Lumineth have a really interesting way of getting units other than Wardens as battle line. So how they can do it is depending, there's a couple of temples and a couple of character ones you can do that change about, but then none of the Vanari units mainly. The big one though is every time you take a unit of Vanari Aurelin Wardens, you get to take 1 unit of either Dawn Riders or Sentinels as battle line as well. So I think having 2 units of Wardens really sets the tone for your army and allows you to take other things as battle line later in the game. And also, you're generally going to want a couple of these units because they're going to be the ones who actually hold your objectives for you. Your Dawn Riders are going to seek out and try and pick off enemy units that are suitable for them to fight, and your Sentinels can't really hold anything, but they're going to do range damage from afar and probably need some Wardens near them for protection. I think this is the best way to start with a Vanari army. 1 Lord Regent, 2 boxes of Wardens, a great little start for an army, and you've got a ton of amazing models to paint here. And so, where do we go to next, I guess, after we got that initial start for our Vanari Lumineth Realm-Lords force? To start with, I'd recommend probably picking up some Sentinels first. Although, I don't really think there's any downside to picking up Dawn Riders first. These are probably interchangeable in either option, in either order that you can pick up. Sentinels, though, are the primary shooting unit that the Vanari force is going to have. We do have Star Shard Ballistas as well, which are a great choice and generally do a bit more higher damage on their hits, but less volume of shots. But Sentinels are really cool. They've got a decent ranged attack where they don't need line of sight, thanks to the little hawk and the warding lantern that they have in their rules. And on top of that, they do mortal wounds with sun metal bows, just like our Wardens do in close combat. So this means we can start doing some mortal wounds at range. They've of course got the Power of Hayesh spell, which allows them to make those mortal wounds hit on 5s instead of 6s, and the Dawn Riders do have these exact same rules. Speaking of Dawn Riders, they've got some really fantastic rules on their War Scroll. They actually get better fighting units with less wounds as they sort of charge and run through smaller units. They get a bunch more attacks when they attack those units, and it really can make a unit of 5 or 10 of them seem a lot more powerful than they initially read on that War Scroll when you start getting all the buffs and they start fighting the right sort of units. On top of that, Dawn Riders are incredibly fast for a cavalry unit. So things like Speed of Hayesh, which double their movement, really do bring about some really crazy fast movement for a on-foot cavalry unit. Speaking of things, though, that maybe will help bring your army together, we've got the next 2 characters, and I think these 2 characters come together as a nice little package. When you start spending Aether Quartz reserves in Lumineth Realm-Lords, Lumineth actually take a leadership penalty for spending said Aether Quartz. Now, what's cool, when you take Battle Shock tests in a Lumineth Realm-Lords army, you can have a Sentinel Cathalar near them. She's one of the mage cast of the Lumineth Realm-Lords, and what she does is she can actually force your opponent to have to take your Battle Shock test. So if one of your units has been massively decimated, or even just slightly taken a Battle Shock test due to eating their own Aether Quartz or something, you can make your opponent take that test instead. And where this comes into play, and all this using your Aether Quartz is really cool, is that you can take a Vanari Bannerblade who gives +1 bravery to all Lumineth Realm-Lord units around him, or potentially +3 if he's actually in the fighting as well. This is pretty cool as it negates the negative effect of you taking your Aether Quartz, but can also still, with the Sentinel Cathalar, combine to make your opponents start taking all those negative tests as well, while you're not actually going to suffer as much if you do fail that roll that the Catalan needs to make. There are a couple of cool characters to take alongside your force. I'd recommend as well a ton of other units. Vanari now, thanks to the second wave of Lumineth Realm-Lords, have a ton of options to play with. The Starshard Ballista, as mentioned, and let's not forget the brand new Swordmasters, the Bladelords, are a great elite unit for clearing out hordes. Though I feel if you're going to get them, you may not need, say, Dawn Riders in your force, as they do a very similar job, just one's much more offensive and one's much more a sort of beta defensive sort of unit. But now that we've sort of talked about all of this, let's get looking into a list and see how we can put all this together in a little starter list for our Vanari Lumineth Realm-Lords. And so here we have a little sample 1000 point army list. It's actually 990 points, which means there's a nice little chance for a triumph in there as well, potentially. So we're going to be playing Lumineth Realm-Lords, obviously, and we're going to be in the Great Nation Siar. So what Siar gives us as a Great Nation is, first of all our units are going to get 2 Aether Quartz reserves instead of 1. This is particularly great because Vanari units are not the best units in the Lumineth Realm-Lords book by themselves. They actually get better as you start putting the buffs, and they're one of the units that really makes good use of Aether Quartz. Plus, as previously mentioned, we've got ways to sort of counteract these Aether Quartz usage within the army. On top of that, we're going to get the Deplete Reserves command ability, which is going to allow us to pick an extra unit to use an Aether Quartz reserve each phase. This is the command ability that we get for all our heroes, so it's pretty cool. It means we're going to get to use. So not only are we getting more Aether Quartz, we're able to use more Aether Quartz as well. So to start off with, we're going to have our Avenario Lord Regent, and he's going to be our general. He's going to have the command trait, the Goading Arrogance, and also the artifact, the Perfect Blade. Both of these are what you have to take on your first character and your general as the particular things because of being CR. So that's not a bad thing though, because Goading Arrogance, we'll talk about a little combo later, but Goading Arrogance allows him to pick an enemy hero within 6 inches of the general in the combat phase, and that enemy unit can only target your general. On top of that, he adds +1 to hit against that particular unit that's attacking him. In addition, he's got the artifact power, the Perfect Blade, and what this does is it allows you to pick one of his weapons and it hits on a 3 at all times. It can never get better than a 3, it can never get worse than a 3. It's a really cool artifact. Now, for our other characters, and I guess for his spell as well, we're going to have the Protection of Hayesh. This is a 5+ damage prevention roll save that he gets to cast onto units whole within 9 inches. So this means you're going to want to have him in sort of like at the center part of your army, generally between those 2 units or wardens we've got in the army list below. So we've then got a Scenario Catalan who's got the spell Total Eclipse, which is the awesome make all command abilities for your opponents count and use 2 command points instead of 1, so just a great thing. We've already mentioned what the Bannerblade and the Catalan can do in the previous little slide, so they're going to be doing all those things. Generally, you're going to want these with your main units of Vanari Wardens to really get the most out of them. Speaking of Vanari, we've got 2 units of Wardens as our main battle line here. And so they're both going to have Ethereal Blessing. I know only one of them can get it off a turn, but generally you're going to pick the one that's going to be in the most fighting. We've then got a unit of Vanari Dawn Riders. They're going to have Speed of Hayesh. Hopefully the idea is that you're going to be able to get your Lord Regent to cast his Power of Hayesh spell and get enough units picked that he can pick the Dawn Riders, who then can cast Speed of Hayesh themselves to then move up the battlefield. We've then got a unit of 10 Sentinels who are going to have Lambent Light, and what Lambent Light allows you to do is you can pick one enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster invisible to them, and until your next hero phase you can reroll hit rolls for attacks with missile weapons that target that unit. So pretty cool. Once again, we're hoping they're probably going to be the 2 units that we pick more than anything to get our general casting his empowered version of Power of Hayesh. Now, lastly, we're going to have an endless spell. I'm going to choose the Sanctum of Amnatok. Now, we've got 30 points, so you could quite easily pick the Hayeshian Twin Stones if you want, but I've got a cool little combo with the Sanctum of Amnatok here. So the Sanctum of Amnatok you can put on your Vanari Lord Regent, who will cast that, and so he is innately -1 to hit, and he'll be another -1 to hit thanks to the Sanctum of Amnatok. He'll also get +1 save, dropping him right down to a very respectable 2+. So this means you can stick him in between those 2 Vanari units, and if a character charges like a big monster trying to hit them, hopefully you can pick them and potentially make them have to attack your Lord Regent, and then he's going to just pretty much wither a lot of things they can do. In addition to this, it also means that if he casts this in your first turn, gets it off, and you can set your battle line, his Protection of Hayesh spell will have a much larger range later in the game because the Sanctum of Amnatok becomes his base effectively. Lastly, we've chosen to take an extra command point just in case you get alpha striked, so you've got a good command point to send there, and you can deploy in sort of different ways of maybe having your 2 Vanari units in 2 flat lines or something like that. But that's what we've got for a little sample army list. What do you think of Vanari? Are you building a Vanari army list up? Are they your favourite part of Lumineth Realm-Lords? Leave us a comment down below and let us know. Well, thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to come chat more with me and other members of our little community here at Sentinel Gaming, you can do so by coming and joining our Discord server, which you'll find a link to in the description of the video. While you're on YouTube as well, go check out my featured channel section, which contains a bunch of other fantastic Age of Sigmar content creators doing everything from battle reports, tactical videos, lore videos, painting tutorials, and more besides that. Lastly though, we'd like to give a shout out to everyone who helps support the channel via Patreon and YouTube members. Thank you to James, AJC, JC, Christian Weir, Soren, Kenny Lowell, Outer and Shot First, Chaospawn, James Crowder, and Andrew Bowen. Thank you all so much for your support. And if you'd like to help support the channel like these fine people do, you can do so by clicking once again on the links down in the description of the video to either YouTube members or Patreon. Thank you all for supporting the channel though, watching the content. Have a nice day, stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now.